We, as the Independent Evaluation Office of the Green Climate Fund, are very pleased to present today a discussion on some operational and emerging lessons from the impact evaluation in climate change projects. Our office, since its establishment, is committed to the learning and accountability of GCF by providing timely and robust evidence of GCF results, including the impact of initiatives, mainly through its learning-oriented real-time assessment program, or otherwise known as LORTA. Anastasia, my colleague, will provide a more detailed overview of LORTA in a few minutes. But let me first present our panelists today, which, as I mentioned, are bringing some lessons, but also firsthand experience with their ongoing impact evaluations in Mexico, Rwanda, and Georgia. I'll start with Denise. Welcome, Denise. Denise Lugo is a socio-environmental research coordinator at the Mexican Fund for the Conservation of Nature. She has over 13 years of experience in managing environmental projects, biodiversity monitoring initiatives, and recently leading the Mexican Fund for Conservation of Nature, Environmental and Social Standard Systems. Then we have James Mugisha, who is a monitoring and evaluation specialist of the Green Gitsumbi project, part of the Rwanda Green Fund, or FONERWA. James brings more than 19 years of experience in monitoring and evaluation with specialization in baseline assessment and impact evaluations. And we have Nana Chabukiani, who works in monitoring and evaluation with UNDP Georgia. She has 10 years of experience in applied research, including project evaluations, policy research, needs assessment in the area of environmental justice, gender studies, and intersectional issues. And lastly, our very own Martin Prowse, a GCF IEU evaluation specialist with 15 years of work experience in international development and supporting the IEU workstream on impact evaluation, as well as evidence reviews and behavioral science. So thank you, Denise, James, Nana, and Martin for being here today. Also, my name is Genta Conchi. I'm an evaluation specialist with the GCF IEU, and with me today is Anastasia Aladusheva, who is an impact evaluation officer with LORTA, and together we will facilitate the discussion today. Also, I would like to mention that the audience today is very diverse, and we have around 35 people that have tuned in for now. We are delighted to have participants joining us from different countries and sectors such as the government, the UN, international financial institutions, and the private sector. We hope that the learning from this webinar will be relevant to your line of work and interests, and also feed into the global learning experience that is uniquely taking place this week across many countries of the world. We encourage you to actively participate and discuss with our panelists today and to make the best of this opportunity. Finally, let me just inform you a bit on the rule of engagement. We have around 60 minutes for this discussion today, which, as you know, is designed as a round table with panelists going over a few talking points, and then we will open the floor for Q&A with the audience. We would kindly like you to mute your microphone during the panel discussion. During the QA, you can raise your hand and then ask a question, but first you need to introduce quickly yourself. Also, we can take questions that you can post in the chat box. Also, kindly note that the workshop is being recorded and that the proceedings from the event will be posted on the Global Evaluation Week website. We will also post in our chat box links to LORTA evaluations. Also, we kindly invite you to follow up on the social media, both on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and you have the address in the slide. So let me now pass the floor to Anastasia, who will present the LORTA initiative briefly and also start the discussion with the panelists. So thank you very much for your attention and wishing to all of us a very productive and insightful event. Over to you, Anastasia.
Thank you so much, Kenta, for this introduction. And I'm happy to give a brief introduction of our LORTA program at IEU. Next slide, please, Saka. In LORTA program, we provide capacity building in impact evaluations. Impact evaluations, which is a specific type of evaluations. We provide capacity building for international accredited entities such as UNDP, and we have a representative of UNDP here in Nana. We also provide capacity building for the direct access entities such as Mexican Fund for Conservation of Nature. We run this program together with the Center for Evaluation and Development, C4ED, in Mannheim in Germany. And the program started in 2018. As you can see in this slide, this program stands on 3 blocks as they appear in its name. So it's learning oriented. So we aim at providing lessons for the GCF, for the international community, for the academics, for international organizations about what works and how in climate change adaptation and mitigation. It's real time. So we incorporate also in our program, we provide capacity building in monitoring or implementation tracking, which helps inform an impact evaluation. So with the aim is providing lessons real time. And it's impact assessment or impact evaluation, which, as I mentioned, is a specific type of evaluation that utilizes statistical analysis of data that we collect, causal inference, and it captures the extent to which certain outcome indicators can be attributed to a specific intervention. Next slide, please. In our portfolio, we have 22 projects or impact evaluations that are spread across the different continents and the so-called GCF results areas. But they're all aimed at increasing resilience of local communities to climate change. So this is what we are trying to measure. Next slide, please. So quick agenda for today. We will start with the project presentations by 3 invited speakers, Denise, Nana, and James. And we're planning to have a few discussion points. One of them is, what are the benefits and challenges of conducting an impact evaluation? How to embed an impact evaluation into the M&E framework and the relevance of that. And also learnings and uptake. How do the learnings can be used in the future and by whom? So thank you very much, and over to you, Denise. Oh, sorry, I forgot one slide. Just very quickly, this is our website. So if you go to our website, you can find our products, and one of our most recent product and the first impact evaluation that we conducted in Malawi. You can find it there. Thank you. Now over to you, Denise.
Thank you very much, Anastasia, and thanks to the Independent Evaluation Unit for the invitation. Hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. I am Denise Lugo on behalf of the Mexican Fund for the Conservation of Nature to present our sub-project River Restoration for Climate Change Adaptation, for shorter, RIOS, which is the first Green Climate Fund project for Mexico and for our organization. And next, please. RIOS began in 2022 and will be implemented in 2 coastal watersheds. The Ameca-Mascota watershed in Jalisco, which drains to the Pacific Ocean, and the Jamapa watershed in Veracruz that drains to the Gulf of Mexico. These watersheds provide critical ecosystem services to large human settlements in the lower part of the basin and support different agricultural, industrial, tourism, and commercial activities in the area. Due to the extreme and irregular precipitation and human-led processes such as deforestation and land degradation, these watersheds are also highly vulnerable to climate change. So each year, there is an increase in extreme events such as floods, landslides, and droughts, with all the negative ecological, social, and economic impacts. So under this context, the RIOS project aims to increase adaptive capacity in these 2 watersheds through river restoration and connectivity. Next, please. How are we going to do this? Through 3 main project components: Component 1, in which local organization will implement sub-projects to conduct restoration, conservation, and improve productive activities to achieve river connectivity and reduce climate vulnerability. Due to its nature, this component has a strong focus on monitoring activities. And the sub-projects within component 1 comprise a portfolio of 4 types of schemes. Scheme 1 is directly linked to grants, which are assigned through a call for proposals to civil society organizations that group landholders and producers, including communities, small landowners, ejidos, and community enterprises. Scheme 2 is the payment for performance, in which a subset of the projects selected from Scheme 1 will enroll in this result-based mechanism to reward those projects that exceed the expected and agreed outcomes with a 10% final bonus. All payments will be attached to intermediate and final results through proxy indicators. Scheme 3 is the public-private payment for ecosystem services, in which communities identified as essential suppliers of hydrological ecosystem services will be assisted to access the payment for ecosystem services program led by the National Forestry Commission in Mexico. The project will also identify and link these communities with private sector institutions downstream that benefit from those ecosystem services for providing matching fund to the payment for ecosystem service program. The last scheme is the business development and access to credits, in which local providers of technical assistance, which we call PLATs, will be identified through a call for proposals. The objective of these PLATs is strengthening the business management skills and the access to credit of agricultural producer groups that are implementing climate smart practices in the territory. The second component of the project is focused to catalyze public and private climate smart investments and promoting coordination at the regional level. And the last component is supporting the development of the National River Restoration Strategy for climate change adaptation. Next slide, please. Well, in RIOS, the impact evaluation will focus on the sub-projects of component 1 through grants, trying to answer the following research question. To what extent RIOS restoration activities improve the ecosystem services and livelihoods? We will try to answer this question by approaching from a watershed level, in which we will combine temporal and spatial scales, through field service to monitor water quality, soil, biodiversity, and also through satellite images to monitor vegetation coverage before and after restoration activities. All these under the assumption that increased forest cover will promote connectivity, leading to an increase in biodiversity. From a household level, we will be performing difference in difference matching with random sampling, with a baseline data survey of 1,800 households, including a treatment of 600 households and a control of 1,200 households. In the control, half of them will be participating in the project and half will not. So we must check for balance and ensure a good comparison for observables and unobservables. So we maintain the robustness of the impact evaluation. Next, please. Well, RIOS impact evaluation is currently within phase 1 of the LORTA program, which is the stage where we are building capacities for the impact evaluation design. So we have been working with the LORTA team on developing the theory of change, the assumptions, the research questions, all the indicators, including the impact indicators, the timeline, the budget, and defining the roles and responsibilities, all meant to prepare the draft for the pre-analysis plan, which is this outline of the methodological approach that will guide the analysis, and that is being produced jointly between the LORTA and the RIOS project teams. I think that will be all for the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Denise, for this interesting presentation. And over to you, James.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone here in Uganda. It's close to something. Yes, I'm delighted to share our evaluation questions and processes that we are going through with regard to strengthening climate resilience of rural communities in northern Rwanda, which is commonly known as, locally known as Green Gicumbi project. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes, I'm happy to share the summary of the project. It has 4 components altogether, as you see. The first component is about watershed protection and climate resilience agriculture. The second component is about sustainable forest management and sustainable energy. And the third component is climate resilience settlements. And the last component is knowledge transfer and mainstreaming. All these components are implemented in an integrated manner. And as you see, the project started in 2019 and will be closing to 2025. So component 1 is about addressing climate resilience challenges, promoting agricultural practices, as well as restoration of landscapes. And then number 2 is about energy efficiency. And number 3 is about reducing the exposure to settlements. So you can go to the next slide. Yes, the key evaluation question is with regard to the project, mainly 2 mitigation indicators and 1 adaptation indicator. But for the sake of today's presentation and the interest of time, I will focus on the 2 indicators of mitigation alone. So the project is expected to reduce 133,667 tons of carbon dioxide, which has to be reduced as a result of the funded projects. And again, related to this, it has to reduce 146 tons as a result also of the funds. So we have basically 2 mitigating indicators that we have to deal with. And then the key issue is how do we keep track of what we're doing with regard to the evaluation questions and what we do to make sure that we reach the target of reducing these targets through impact measurements. Next. So what we did is that we to the extent possible, we looked at the parameters that contribute towards the reduction of these emissions. And owing to this, we started with the baseline when the project started in 2017 at the design phase. And then we kept on calculating backwards, starting with 2021. So overall, I will not go into these details, but we looked at what are the emissions that were reduced using the business as usual approach. And then we looked at the afforestation and land use management practices. Then we looked at the energy factories, which we have in the project area, as well as other energy efficiency interventions, such as the supply of biogas, the supply of energy, improved cooking stoves, and all of these. After doing a lot of calculations and methodology, as most of you know, are aware, we came up with the total reduction of emissions by 2020, by 22,000 in a course of just 2 years after the annual progress report of 2021. So next. Yes, so in the course of evaluating some of the practices that we are using, the key focus was how do we showcase the impact that is happening in the project as a result of the interventions that we do. And so one of the things was doing the calculations that I showed you, we were able to come up with the 22,000 tons of carbon emissions. And then the other one, we also looked, we went ahead and looked at the impact on agriculture per sector, per season. So we are looking at the agriculture yield in terms of tons per hectare per year. And we realized a significant increment in the project area as a result of the activities that we did. So as you see, overall, we had a cumulative change in maize by 11% increment, beans had 18 increment, and then Irish potato 26, and the last was wheat, which were the value chain crops. So the increase basically we are looking at to what extent do we attribute this to the interventions of the project, and this is what we came up with. Next slide, please. Yes, as my predecessor said, the other aspect we are tracking is the impact of within the M&E framework. We are looking at the change in the vegetation cover, where we use the USGS Earth Explorer, and we compare the changes with regard to vegetation cover in the same period, in the same year after year. So for example, on the 17th June 2018, during the feasibility study, this was the first vegetation cover that we had, and then at the baseline, and now we are keeping track of what's changing over time. This is now the second in 2021. So this will be done over time. Every year we do the same. Every June, 17th of June, we take the same satellite picture, and then we see changes, and then we try to the extent possible link it to our interventions. And then next slide, sorry. Yeah, these are what we track in the vegetation cover. We look at the agricultural land use. We look at areas, built up area. We look at open land, grassland, and then we look at tree cover, and then the crowd. So overall, as you will see, tree coverage was reduced by 3%, which is looked at as a bad issue, but that's how it came up. And I will explain this. This is part of the challenge that we made. Next slide. Yes. To finalize, as part of the key learnings and recommendations from the findings and evaluation that we saw, one was that there is a key challenge which included the carbon sink in forestry and agroforestry for just a short period, which results in a low impact of the project. So the project started in 2020, and then we did the assessment impact evaluation in 2021. And so we had rehabilitated, we had cut the trees that were there, and then we replacing them with new ones. So when we were at the time of reporting, then we had the challenge, the carbon sink, we had a negative impact because we had cut them due to the short period we are supposed to report. Then the second, and for this one, we recommend that in the long term, carbon sequestration is more recommended, at least up to 20 years, because short of 20 years, as a project, you will not realize like what I can call cumulative increment with regard to the impact, positive impact from the project, because the minimum projects, the minimum trees that have been cut can come up is at least not less than 7 years. So anything below 7 years, and this is a 6-year project. So in terms of impact realization, you find you have not made much impact, but actually you've done a lot. But if it was to be put on 20 years scale over and above, then that impact can be much realized. Then also the land cover analysis, the vegetation cover is also expected to improve with a number of couple of years ahead. So you cannot see changes in vegetation cover for a project that is less than 5 years or 6 years, so that you start seeing what is realizing positive with regard to climate change aspects, because the time is too short to measure the impact of that. So we also recommend at least to start measuring those impact indicators over a period, maybe 20 years or 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. It's a good example of how you can utilize spatial data for an impact evaluation. And indeed, it takes a long time to see the impact. We have one question in the chat. How you actually measure tons of CO2 reduced? Do you have any specific tools for M3 and M4?
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I forgot to tell you that I have my colleague here called Elise, who I think is part of the members there. Is the one who we worked together to come up with this validation, and so he will be chipping in also to respond to some of the questions as a group. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for the presentation.
Hello. Do you want me to reply? Do you want me to reply to that question?
Yes, over to you, Elise. Go ahead.
Yes, actually, we used the IPCC 2006 methodology for evaluating the baseline, but we also look, the methodology is most related to IPCC 2006, but also we consider different articles. So we did our own model in Excel sheet. So by considering different articles, and from that we can estimate what has been reduced. And yeah, so maybe it's not easy to to mention in detail for each sector, because we did for agriculture, forest, and land use, where we consider the sink in forestry and agroforestry. But also for the energy, we consider the different intervention, like the cook stove, which has been supplied. So most of them are in tier 2. So we consider like the baseline where we assume that there is no improved cook stove, and then the mitigation with improved cook stove. So we consider how much that this cook stove reduce. So maybe James could not present everything in 5 slides, but with the detailed report, it is easy to understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alize. I hope Alize answered your question. We have one question on resilience. So I wonder if we can take this one question to both maybe James and Denise, and then we go to Nana, and then we have a Q&A session. So we'll leave the rest for the Q&A, if that's okay. So one question from Sangai: how do you define resilience in the context of impact evaluation, and how do you actually know that resilience have been achieved through your project? May I direct this question first to Denise, if Denise can. I know it's only phase 1 of the impact evaluation, but maybe you have some ideas. What do you perceive as resilience? And then maybe to James. Thank you.
In RIOS, we didn't use resilience. We use adaptive capacity because of the complexity to measure it in the field. So maybe trying to, in the impact evaluation, to design the questions to other terminology or other concept that will be directly linked to the project, but maybe will be easier to measure, will be a good idea. And that's why we didn't try to measure resilience, because it's not a easy definition first, and it's not as easy to measure in the field, at least in Mexico. So that's why we end measuring adaptive capacity. Yeah,
that's indeed true. Thank you, Denise. James?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think I'm not far from my colleague there, because resilience is a little bit complex to define and to measure and track, but rather we opt to use by and large adaptive capacity. But for the case of Rwanda specifically, we are looking at the extent to which people can be able to bounce back and then move from one category, because we have three social categories in Rwanda. So depending on which category of social classes or economic affairs that you are in, at the end of the year, we are able to assess and see who have moved from category 1, which is to category number 2, as a proxy measure. Of course, from the climate perspective and angle, it becomes another issue because we use adaptive measures. But for the entire other economic aspects and the socio-economic aspects, we have the indicators to use. But specifically for environmental protection and climate resilience practices, we also use adaptive capacities and practices. Thank you.
That's very indeed true, James. Thank you very much. So maybe we can move to Nana's presentation and then take other questions. Nana, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining, and I hope everyone can hear my voice well. I am Nana from UNDP Georgia, and I'm very happy that I have this opportunity to present the impact evaluation that is planned in the framework of our project. And the project is called Scaling Up Multi-Hazard Early Warning System and the Use of Climate Information in Georgia. Next slide, please. So this project is financially supported by Green Climate Fund. This is one of the large scale projects that UNDP Georgia is currently implementing. And the overall objective of the project is to reduce the exposure of Georgia's communities, livelihoods, and infrastructure to climate-induced natural hazards by establishing a well-functioning nationwide multi-hazard early warning system and by enhancing risk-informed local action. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more about the project so that I could then switch to the impact evaluation. So the project has 3 major components, and the impact evaluation is going to be conducted under the component number 3, which is improved community resilience, improving community resilience through the implementation of multi-hazard early warning system, and more specifically, implementation of community-based early warning systems and also community-based climate risk management. This particular intervention will happen in 100 most vulnerable communities across 11 major river basins in Georgia. And so how do we find most vulnerable communities? And in our case, vulnerability is assessed on the one hand by how the communities are exposed to a variety of disasters and hazards. So what's the level of their exposure to different hazards? And on the other hand, we're assessing their socioeconomic vulnerability. So based on these 2 different assessments, we find 100 most vulnerable communities across Georgia. Next slide, please. So this takes me to the impact evaluation that is still planned. So we have not started implementing the evaluation. So our research question is whether CBEWS and CBCRM contribute to enhancing households' resilience against natural hazards. And here I should mention that community-based early warning system, so CBEWS, is implemented in all 100 communities, while community-based climate risk management, CBCRM, is implemented only in 80 communities. And therefore, the question number 2 is whether there is a significant additional benefit from providing CBCRM activities to the vulnerable communities. So for this impact evaluation, we're applying randomized controlled trial, the design of RCT, and overall there will be 3,000 households across these 100 most vulnerable communities. We'll have 20 communities in treatment group number 1, and these 20 communities will be the ones that will receive CBEWS activities. And we will have 80 communities in treatment group number 2, which will receive CBEWS as well as CBCRM activities. And in control group, we will actually have 100 other communities that will receive neither CBEWS nor CBCRM. So one of the next slide, please. Now, as I said, we are just planning this impact evaluation. We have not started it yet. So one of the challenges and one of the questions that we're asking now is that the vulnerable communities, the 100 most vulnerable communities that I've mentioned, will be identified throughout the project according to the groups of river basins. So in the first table, you see that there will be 4 different groups of river basins. For example, in the first group, there will be 3 different rivers, and we will identify the most vulnerable communities across these 3 river basins. Then after about half a year, we will identify the most vulnerable communities in the second group of river basins, etc., etc. So baseline will have to follow the identification of most vulnerable groups. So instead of having one baseline that usually evaluations have, we'll have 4 different baselines. Now a little bit of a challenge that we have now is that we still do not know how these 100 most vulnerable communities will be distributed across the 11 river basins. And therefore, we still don't know how the 3,000 households will be distributed across the baselines. So basically, this is the challenge. This is the question, and we do have some ideas how to deal with this question. But also, if anyone from the attendees have similar experience, I would be very happy to listen to your examples and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana, for this presentation and for sharing the challenges. And I would just maybe add that one of the challenges to also, how do you conduct randomized controlled trial when you work with the vulnerable communities? So whether there's an ethical problem there. So this is an interesting question that we were also hoping to discuss maybe slightly today or at some later webinars. Thank you very much. So if I may, I give floor now to my colleague, Martin Prowse, on sharing his reflections on the LORTA program and on the lessons from the LORTA program. And then in the remaining time, we will go through some of your questions in the chat. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Anastasia, and thank you, Genta, for the opportunity to highlight some of the lessons learned so far. And it's a real privilege to be able to present alongside James and Nana and Denise. And as you've all heard, the LORTA program is a technical assistance program which embeds impact valuation in funded M&E activities. And most importantly, LORTA responds to the needs of accredited entities who are funded by the GCF. So LORTA is a demand-driven program, and we respond to the evaluation needs, especially of direct access entities. And that's particularly important because direct access entities are one of the most innovative aspects of the GCF's business model. They're so important because they bring climate action closer to sort of national and subnational level. And this means that there's greater alignment with country priorities and country programming. Next slide, please. So there are three foundations on which LORTA is built, and this sort of goes to the heart of how LORTA operates and how LORTA creates country ownership. And so the three foundations are creating equal partnerships and mutual trust, flexibility, and the importance of learning uptake. So in terms of creating equal partnerships and mutual trust, the first foundation starts when projects participate in our design workshops. And here, as we've heard from Denise, projects go step by step through developing an impact valuation. And these partnerships are enhanced when projects do onboard into the program. So for example, the initial inception workshop broadens the group of stakeholders that are engaged within the impact valuation. So this provides an opportunity for ministries and wider executing entities, implementing agencies to get buy-in and to foster support for the impact valuation. Next slide, please. So I just want to give an example of this, and this is from our partnership with Land Bank in the Philippines. So the Land Bank project combines improvements in hazard forecasting with support for how local communities, decision makers and actors prepare and plan for extreme events. So the project combines early warning systems at the local level with index-based triggers and standing operating procedures for a shock-responsive social protection system. So when we onboarded Land Bank into the LORTA program, the Land Bank team convened over 50 participants over 3 days from 10 different institutions to participate in the design, to get buy-in and engagement from different stakeholders, and to determine which component of the impact evaluation could be evaluated. And we settled on evaluating the types of early warning messages that are most effective in inducing early responses from participants. The second foundation is flexibility. So after the design is settled on, LORTA maintains its relationship with the accredited entity until preparations for the baseline survey start. And throughout this time, LORTA repeatedly engages with stakeholders and implementing agencies to maintain the understanding of, but also the benefits of an impact valuation. So building this relationship and often rebuilding it time and time again, it takes time, it takes patience, and also takes a lot of flexibility. And I'll give you an example of the flexibility side. And this is from FP35, which is Climate Information Services for Resilient Development Planning in Vanuatu. And this is managed by a regional direct access entity, which is the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Programme, ESPRE, and they're based in Samoa. So this project was approved in 2016, and the original design aimed to evaluate fisheries and agricultural interventions. However, due to delays in implementation, and also due to the COVID pandemic, we had to adjust. And initially, we supported the direct access entity through providing support for a monitoring plan for an impact evaluation. And now that funds have been dispersed, we've now been agile and flexible, and we're now re-engaging with ESPRE to develop an impact evaluation in terms of the uptake and use of climate information systems. So that illustrates the foundation of flexibility and of moving with project teams in terms of the implementation timelines and in terms of disbursements from the GCF and in terms of the project end date and making sure that we're agile and flexible to fit in with project teams' priorities. So then the last of the three foundations is the importance of learning, uptake, and use. And before handing back to Anna, I just wanted to highlight the incentive system that LORTA creates. So project teams within the LORTA portfolio, they enhance their knowledge about indicators around monitoring, around real-time tracking, and around impact evaluation. The Secretariat in the GCF participates in selecting projects for LORTA, and they also benefit from the enhanced capacity of accredited entities in monitoring, in evaluation, in reporting, and we hear this from Secretariat staff. And lastly, the IU benefits because we meet our mandate in providing evidence on what works, why, and by how much. So it's through events like today's event that LORTA can help inform the evidence needs of the wider sort of climate finance community, and also make sure that we're meeting our obligations to the board of the GCF. So back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Martin, for this comprehensive overview and your reflections on the challenges that we have in LORTA. And now I'll give floor to Genta to lead on our Q&A session. Genta, over to you.
Thank you, Anastasia. We kind of started the Q&A already, but just to follow up on some of the questions, and I can start with the first question we received from Evangeline. I mean, the question we haven't answered yet. And she's asking about the longevity of such projects. For example, the carbon sequestration, for instance, takes 20 years. And so resilience and sustainability is an issue, but is there any way we can break this down in a way that we can measure shorter impacts? Or otherwise, is there any way we can break down the goals any further? I'm asking all four of you if you have any thoughts on this or any reflections, or is there any way we can adapt the goals as we go with the impact evaluations?
Thank you. This is James. I can try to respond to the first one. So what we do is that as the project starts, for us, what we did is that as usual, we did a baseline assessment for the project, but we combined both the baseline assessment together with the initial impact assessment with support from the LORTA team. So by this, we're able to have the initial situation at the start of the project, using both the baseline for the project and also the initial impact assessment. And then after 1 year, we were able to take an assessment with regard to impacts to measure the carbon sequestration that we have been able to reduce on an annual basis. But at the same time, down the road, during this year, in the third year, we'll be conducting a mid-term review where we'll be able to compare the mid-term achievements versus the initial impact assessment, and so to say, and continue like that in that way. So we don't have to wait for the 20 years to have the overall impact for the project, but we have milestone within which we check every year, and also within also the midterm and end line of the project. So that also helps us to know the extent to which we are on track with regard to the impact indicators. Thank you. Maybe I don't know if Elise has something to add on. Thanks.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add on this, but what James was saying about 20 years, actually, we see that the impact also can increase with the time, because when we evaluated recently, the impact was not that much, because there was maybe a delay for like 1 year to plant the trees due to the fact that the project started a bit late and the COVID-19 issues. But as the tree grows, we are expecting the project to achieve the target in the coming 2-3 years. Yeah. But for the moment, like when we did the impact evaluation this year, it was for the last year, 2021, it was not that much because of that 1 year delay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. I think Martin wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you, James. Thank you, Elise, and thank you, Gente. And for 2 quick reflections, which I'm sure that Anna can extend and take further. So firstly, in terms of kind of short-term impacts, we're able to, to include indicators for intermediate outcomes in terms of adoption, changes in attitudes, changes in behavior, and that can give us sort of very short-term indications on sort of uptake and use of particular interventions and changing practices. In terms of sort of the long-term kind of 20-year horizon, so when we create panel data sets and we do so in a sort of robust, rigorous way, we really lay a really good foundation for project teams and stakeholders to continue the panel data set and to be able to estimate, offer sort of causal estimates over a much longer time period, including beyond the duration of the GCF project. And this also is supported through the capacity building part of LORTA. And at that stage, I'll hand back to Gente and Anna.
Thank you, Martin. Anastasia, do you want to come in?
Yes, I just want to add, thank you very much, Martin. And I just want to come in on non-linearity comment. And one of the lessons so far from LORTA is that the building theory of change is extremely important. And I think that's the stage where you actually define what are your short-term impacts, what are your long-term impacts. For example, at what point in time you measure, let's say, food security, at what time you measure the resilience. And it also can be non-linear, right? So you can be either, it can go down and then it can go up because of various factors. So I just wanted to bring up the importance of the theory of change. And Gente, if you allow me, there's one question from Evangeline on mapping and profiling of households. If I can ask Nana actually to come in on that because of the UNDP vulnerability assessment, maybe she can talk about these. But also I can see that we have a colleague from C4D, Clementine Sadani. So Clementine, please jump in whenever you also feel like to jump in, because she's C4D is one of the that work closely with the project teams. So over to you, Nana, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. When it comes to mapping, I think what I should say here is that one thing that we know is we know the regions and we know the local municipalities where these 100 communities will be. So we know where these rivers, obviously the geography of the rivers. So obviously we have the municipalities where they flow. So we do have information on the population within these municipalities. So basically, this is the information that we will be using throughout the evaluation, and this will be the information that we will be using for sampling purposes for sure. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but but yeah.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next question. I think I want to ask you, Denise, to respond to our colleague from UNDP Bhutan, who's asking on the next steps after the impact evaluation design has been finalized. So are you planning for follow-up surveys, and what will be the frequency of these surveys over the course of the projects, if you plan to do so?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, at the household level, we will be doing 2 follow-up surveys, one at the midterm and one at the end of the project. And for the watershed level, monitoring will be sustained activity through all the project life cycle. So after the phase of design of the impact evaluation, we will put hands on to apply and implement all the activities that we have in the pre-analysis plan.
Thank you, Denise. I think in respect of time, we have only a couple of minutes left, but I really wanted to address another question on how can they be part of LORTA, because we have, again, our colleague from UNDP Bhutan is expressing an interest to conduct an impact evaluation on one of their GCF projects. Martin, you mentioned a little bit on the workshop and the criteria, but if you can summarize how the specific projects can be part of LORTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Genta, and thank you for the question. So each year we hold a design workshop, and we've held 4 so far. And this year we're holding the design workshop next month in July. And so last year and this year we're prioritizing direct access entities in terms of participation in the design workshop, but in the first 2 years we had a much broader net, and so we're balancing the LORTA portfolio across international accredited entities such as UNDP, as well as direct access entities, and as I intimated earlier, direct access entities are a really innovative aspect of the GCF. And they bring climate action much closer to national programming and subnational level. And it also fits very closely with LORTA's mandate on capacity building. So to respond directly to your question, keep in touch, contact us, and we'll offer as much information and invitations as we can. Back to you, Genta.
Thank you, Martin. And also Nazir, to answer your question, yes, we will share with you some of the project documents or methodology from the Mexico project, as well as from UNDP Georgia as well. Would be possible to share them with you. I think we are on time to close. Just one quick, closing remark. I think this was a very interesting discussion, especially getting to know this project that are in their initial phases, but at the same time, some of the anticipated challenges that are being foreseen, and I think LORTA support, technical support, will be crucial in addressing some of these challenges. Definitely keep an eye on the LORTA website for the progress of these projects and how they're unfolding. And if you have any further questions, please also reach out to us and we'll be happy to respond to them. But over to you, Anastasia or Martin, if you have any other closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Genta. And I also would like to thank the participants. Thank you, Lana, Denise, and James for sharing this. We didn't manage to cover all of that. For example, the policy uptake, the lessons, how to embed impact evaluation into an M&E framework, but maybe we don't have actually answers to these questions at the moment. But I think it's good to pose them and to think them through, because impact evaluation is not easy. And definitely we can have a lot of challenges along the way, but it's something which has it's a big potential, and that's what we see in LORTA at IAU. So thank you very much, and thank you very much again for facilitating that.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of participants, and we'll be sharing with you the presentations and some of the documents of these projects. Thank you. Have a nice rest of the day.